Can you hear me now?
I can.
Excellent. Good. So, okay, thanks, Jonny. So if we were in a face-to-face environment, let me just throw a question in. What coffee or tea would you like before we start?
Well, it actually, it would be a builder's cup of tea. That's just what I like.
One sugar or two?
No sugar, just some milk. So that's good to hear. So yeah, hopefully you can all see this. If you've got questions, please feel free to interrupt and ask. I know one of you was asking around that you've got a Google My Business, but you've had trouble verifying. That's probably not a simple answer to give you. Google are sometimes not very easy to deal with, and that's just a frustrating part of this, I guess. But once you've managed to get ownership, everything becomes a lot easier. So yeah, that's just a frustrating part. So what does Google My Business offer? Well, local search, if we look at some stats straight away, 46% of all searches, Dimitri, we've turned him off. There we go. 46% of all searches on Google are seeking local information, whereas 97% of search engine users searched online to find a local business. 86% of consumers rely on the internet to find a local business, and almost a third, 29%, search for local businesses at least once a week. So we're talking about the map listing. We're talking about being in this listing when someone does a search in Google and you come into this local pack, which is what we call it. And you can see that at the top listing here, there's a little ad, and that just confirms that you are able to do some advertising within this local pack now as well. And that can all be controlled inside Google My Business. Now, Google My Business is simple to find. It's just go to google.co.uk/business. Inside there, you can control what ultimately is your free Yellow Pages listing, the good old-fashioned Yellow Pages. We all needed to be in there, or the BT phone book. You all need to be in Google My Business. And if you just go to google.com or google.co.uk/business, you can achieve that. You do need a phone number and an address. So I know some people don't like using their address if they're a small business, they're a single owner, they're working from home, they might not want to use their address. But my advice is to either use an accountant's address or another company that you can collaborate with, or get a virtual office, because the power of local is huge. Whether you want to be global and international, that's fine, but the power of local is also huge. So it's about having an address, having a phone number. Again, if you don't want to use your own phone number, you might need to buy a phone number, but in my opinion, it's worth having that address and phone number and creating a listing. So what we're also talking about here is the Maps listing. So not just on the Google search page, but inside Google Maps. So whether that be on a mobile device or a desktop device, someone using the map and doing a search within there. And that makes us start thinking about some of the keywords that we should be using. It makes us think about some of the thinking about the category that we should put our business into, and making sure that we're using as many key phrases, questions that people ask us within the description of the listing. The other thing that we can control is the knowledge panel, and that's on the right-hand side of Google's homepage. So when you do a search for a company, you will see a knowledge panel come up on the right, and that can also be controlled with Google My Business. But also there's some other techniques that we can use that can control some of the other elements to that knowledge panel, and that's going to be using something called schema. Schema is a language that all the search engines understand and have signed up to, and enable you as a website owner to be able to deliver content and put that content directly into Google's database. If you imagine Google as a big database, you have the ability to be able to insert data directly into Google's database in the right columns, in the right fields, etc. And schema gives you the ability to do that. So I'm going to talk about schema a bit later on. So as I've said, Google My Business, just go to google.co.uk/business. You need to verify. So if you've not set a listing up before, then you will need to verify the listing, and that can be done over the phone, or it can be done through some kind of postcard or letter, and that gives you a verification PIN, and you can then verify to say that you do actually own the business. Once you're in the panel itself, there's a lot of options in there. My advice is to take your time and go click through all of the different screens. And this is your opportunity to give as much content or information to Google as possible. So the more that you can give it, the better. So what we're looking for there is, give your opening hours, give your if you've got products and categories, let's get them all in there. If you've got a service, let's split the service down into different key phrases and keywords that are to do with that service. So what you need to do is sort of paint a picture to Google that you're relevant for all of these different things. And you might have a service that you offer, but if you talk to your clients, you might find that they call it different things. There's a different way of calling that service or naming that service. So what you might want to do is create a number of different services within Google My Business. I'll show you this on this screen here. So at the top right here, we've got appointments, then products, then services. And here you can add multiple services. And if you want to be found for X, for whatever that phrase is, then having a service on your Google My Business page is a good start to achieving that. So it's, don't go to the nth degree and create, 100 services when actually all you do is offer one service. But if there is a good enough reason to justify calling that service 3 or 4 different things that actually ultimately means the same thing, that's fine. Because if it is called 3 or 4 different things, then it gives you the ability to create something that's relevant for when people are making that search. So if I go back to this screen, some of the things that Google's wanting you to do is add photos. The more photos, you want at least a minimum of 5 photos, but Google is looking for you to add photos into its index. You can get a lot of search traffic from Google Images, and adding photos to your Google My Business listing gives you a higher chance of those images being shown in Google image search. But also it adds the context to the listing and adds a bit more personality and trust, and it can help from a conversion point of view as well. You can create adverts within here. You can put COVID-19 updates. You can update business hours for bank holidays, all sorts of stuff like that. What it's also wanting you to do is to post content in here. So Google has tried to be a social network for many, many years. They've tried so many different ways of doing it, but they've failed every time. They've tried to be the next Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They have totally failed. But there's lots of examples of how they've tried over the years. Having said that, they are trying yet again to integrate a bit more social into the Google My Business listing. But what that really means is nothing more than giving you as the owner the ability to be able to put some content on your Google listing, and that content can be shown and can be used to help search results be more relevant, but also can be shown if it's relevant for Google to show that when someone's making a search. So you can add
a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Is it possible you can actually add a short video into that type of space?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So it's images, video, or written content. So yeah, absolutely all types of content can be added into that post. I think there's a limit on the length of the video. I'm not sure if it's 10 minutes. There is some kind of limit on the videos, but certainly short videos, absolutely fine. So once you've got familiar with the panel, it's then going into each of these different parts of the panel and just trying to think about, what data could you enter? So if we go, for example, to the information page, my advice is to literally enter in every single box that you can. And even, for example, add an opening date at the bottom right there. All you're doing is you're painting a picture, you're giving Google a bit of history, understanding how long the brand's been around. But also, if you imagine being Google and you've got, 10,000 listings, if you imagine you're trying to recruit and you've got 10,000 CVs, well, one of the first things you do is sift out the rubbish. And one of the ways of doing that is, has everyone answered question A, for example? So what Google's going to do is sort of look for people that are engaged with it and that have actually entered lots of information. And it's just applying common sense all the time. So the more that you can give it, the better. And it's about just entering as much data as possible. And when given the opportunity to write a description and it's 300 words, give them 300 words and think about the keywords in there. Think about making it relevant, thinking about using questions that clients ask, think about using phrases that clients may type into Google. So I talked about the ability to add events. You can add updates, you can add offers, and you can add products. So if you're an e-commerce site, you can add products here. If you've only got a couple of products, then you could do them, add them in here in Google My Business. If you've got quite a few products, my advice actually is to open a Google Merchant account. There's lots of different Google accounts, unfortunately. They all use the same login, but you've got to create the account within the login. So if you've got a number of e-commerce products, you need to look at Google Merchant Center. And within that, you can upload product listings. And all of these things relate to your Google My Business account. But from a product point of view, as I said, if you only got a couple, do it inside GMB. If you've got lots, then do it inside Google Merchant Center. You can, and likewise, you can tie this account to a Google AdWords account as well. So if you're doing proper Google advertising, pay-per-click, you can tie the two accounts together and link them within the dashboard. Here's an example of an offer that Google suggests that you could use. I'm not suggesting that you should be doing offers, but if you happen to be doing offers at any time for any of your products or services, then you should absolutely be telling Google and putting that up on there. The next thing to consider is reviews. So if you were Google and you had all of these listings, how would you decide, who ranks a bit higher? Well, one of the obvious things is, does the listing have any reviews? And also, what are the reviews like? And what do people say in the reviews? What are the keywords? What are the words that people are using in the review? So if you want to be found for, we sell websites, we sell search engine optimization. If you want to be found for search engine optimization, do my clients, when they're leaving a review, talk about SEO and search engine optimization? Because if they do, then Google is using that content to understand the relevancy of my business. Whereas if all they ever talked about was, pink elephants, and we don't sell pink elephants, then Google's going to wonder, what's going on here. So it's about, and this user generated content, UGC, it's a big thing a lot across many websites. Google loves user generated content because it's not just the business owner saying something about the business. It's the potential client, the customer, the current client saying what they think of the business, but also giving those words around the business as well. So reviews are so much more important than you can imagine, not just from someone checking out your business and seeing a review, but the ability to be able to create content around that and create a reputation and trust, but also context. Context really important. So my point here is, what's your review strategy? How do you generate reviews? How many reviews have you currently got on Google? I'm guessing some of you have got 0, probably because you just haven't asked for any. So how can you start asking for them? How can you, as a process, start making sure that every time the happy moment with a particular client or product or service, when's the happy moment, and when can you send out a request to ask for a review? And how can you make it really easy for them to get to this page as well? So my advice is to go to Google, search your business, click write a review. And what that does is it generates a URL at the top of the page. And if you copy that URL, you could send that URL out to your clients or customers. Unfortunately, they do need a Google account to be able to leave a review, so that could put some people off. But as a starting point, you could send that request out to people that have a Gmail address, because if they have a Gmail address, they've definitely got a Google account. But you could also just say, yeah, you do need to create an account, but it would be really helpful to my business, and it would mean a huge amount, and would really appreciate it. So what's your review strategy? And then secondly, reply to every single review, whether it's positive or negative. Absolutely reply. And when you reply, think of keywords. So don't just stuff keywords in there, but make it readable, make it have sense, and try and drop some keywords in it. Because again, there's your opportunity to create that context. I was going to just pick up on negative reviews because I get asked a lot, with the concern of getting a negative review. In my opinion, a 5-star review, having, 5.0 as your star rating, I don't think is good. I think having 4.7, 4.8, 4.9 is far better, because in reality, you can't please everyone, and there's always going to be someone that's not happy. So what I'd like to see is a business that has sort of 4.7, 4.8 star reviews, because what that says to me is that it feels genuine and it looks like it's quite good. Whereas if all I see is 5-star, I start thinking, well, is this real? Is it fake? How are they getting rid of the negative ones? So I wouldn't worry about having a negative review. I'd just concentrate on getting reviews. And hopefully, if you offer a good service, the majority of them are going to be positive. And it's also how you deal with that negative review and how you reply. So it's about making sure that when you do reply on Google, and you demonstrate in a public arena your customer service, because that's your opportunity to show your customer service. Because me as a user, I'd be looking at how you dealt with a negative review, and I'd read what you've said, and that would give me either more trust or less trust. I think Teresa's got a question here. How do you add your own website details rather than the Google generated one? How do you add your own website details rather than the Google generated one? Teresa, what do you mean by that?
I've just gone on feedback to our page. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've just gone to our page and I've gone to website, and it comes up with network.business.site, and I want to try and add
right.
.co.uk. Sorry about the feedback.
Right, let me explain that. Okay. No, it's fine. So yeah, I understand what you're asking now, actually. So the website button at the bottom left there, if you were to go through to that, if you were to click that, actually what that is Google's version of creating your own website. So if you don't have a website, that's the only reason you need to go into that section. If you have a website, completely ignore that section. And I don't know many people that are using the free Google website, but of course, if you don't have one, and you just a local plumber, for example, that hasn't built a website yet, then that gives you a great way to be able to build a website. You don't need to use that area of the dashboard at all, and your website details would go into the information page. So if you click info, you can enter your website URL in that section and just ignore what's going on the website section, unless you've actually created one and you didn't mean to, and then maybe you just need to delete it. So hopefully that answers your question. So I talked about reviews now, and we've got to think of not just Google reviews, because what Google then does is it goes out to have a look at what else it can see, because of course it's trying to build that reputation and understand, and triangulate things and see what else is going on elsewhere. So what is your review strategy across all of these different areas? Now, I'm not suggesting that your business is right for TripAdvisor. I'm also not suggesting that you should be paying the price that Trustpilot charge. But for example, there's reviews.io that you could look at. There's LinkedIn recommendations. There's lots of different places. There's Facebook reviews. There's lots of different places. And the question is, where are you asking people to go to leave reviews? The next thing that's quite interesting inside the panel is the insights area. And the insights area gives us all sorts of insights, data as to what's going on with our listing. And there's some quite interesting things in there. So just to give you sort of a quick overview of what you might find in there, for example, it tells you how customers are searching for your business. Is it based on them knowing your business name or not? So that's an interesting thing, because obviously if you're trying to increase your organic reach, you want people to find you for your services and products, not for your business name, because if they know your business name, then you've defeated the object. So here you can track how that's going. You could also get an idea of how people find you. Are they finding you through Google's search page, or are they finding you through Google Maps? And that might help feed into whether your site needs to be more mobile friendly, whether some of the messaging needs to be a bit different depending on how they're finding you. Other things to consider are what actions they take when they get to your listing. Do they visit your website? Do they request for directions? Do they call you? And you can monitor this data on an ongoing basis. What's really interesting is if you do have a bricks and mortar location-based business where people do come to you, there's some really interesting data in being able to understand the postcodes of where people come to you from. So if you're in the, this screenshot is the middle of Leeds, it gives you an idea of how far away people are Googling you and asking for directions. And that then can inform things like direct mail campaigns. It could inform leaflet drops and just help you understand your audience far better. So if you've got, a business with a number of branches, this can be really helpful in terms of data. And by the way, Google knows everything. So when someone does a search on a mobile phone for a business, let's say I want to go to B&Q at the weekend, and I've forgotten the address. I go to Google, I Google it, find the address, put it in my sat nav, go to B&Q. Well, depending on your privacy settings, depending on what phone you've got, Google has access to your location data. The simple fact that you're using Google Maps, you probably will have allowed location data, because Google can know exactly where you are to help you, give you directions, of course. So Google can then see you in the B&Q store, and it knows that you Googled it either earlier or last week or whenever it was. So what it does is it starts putting all of this data together and starts tracking it and looking at it against other competitors. So it understands that actually, right, okay, 80% of people that ask for B&Q's address end up inside B&Q. Maybe that's a stat or not, I'm not sure. But the fact is that Google can look at that data. So is that something that that you should be aware of? And I'm just making you think about it and understanding how Google then might interpret it and what it might do with it. Other things, Google can tell you the times of day people are calling and how many call and which day of the week, and also whether people are looking at your images and how often they're looking at those images. We've got some other questions. So how do I know if my website is mobile friendly, and if not, how do I make it friendly? So really simple tip for that would be using the mobile friendly test that Google has, which I'll drop a link into in a second in the chat. Teresa, can you have more than one person managing the page for your Google business? Really good question. If I go back to this screen here, oh, it's lower down. I don't think I have a screenshot of it. There it is. Is it there? Yes, top right. So lowered, this is split up, so it's a long menu, just one long menu. Lower down the menu, you'll see users tab, and inside that users tab you can add multiple business owners or business managers, and yes, you can absolutely have other people help you with your listing, and that could be letting a digital marketing agency, for example, having access, or maybe there's people internally where you want to allow them to post content. You can do that too. For the person asking about the mobile friendly test, I've put a link in the chat there for you to be able to run your website through a tester that tells you if your website is mobile friendly or not, and if it's not, it gives you actions on what need doing, and you might need to get a developer involved to be able to action some of those actions. So let's give you a few more stats. Teresa, can you switch the primary owner? I believe you can. I believe you can. Yeah, in fact, I know you can. You can transfer the business listing to another owner. Yes, you definitely can. So 30% of Google mobile searches are related to location. 72% of consumers who search for local businesses end up visiting stores within 5 miles. We've got 78% of local mobile searches result in an in-store purchase. I realize that a lot of this is e-commerce, but my strong message to you is that this works for services as well, and whether they visit you or not is really quite irrelevant. 50%, more than 50%, sorry, of near me searches result in a store visit. 72% of consumers say search is their first choice to find information on local merchants, and 86% of people look up the location of a business on Google Maps. 76% of people who search on their smartphones for something nearby visit a business within a day, and 28% of those searches for something nearby result in a purchase. So what are the top ranking factors for local search? Well, the most obvious one is having your listing verified. Really simple, but if it's not verified, then it's probably not going to be used a great deal by Google. The next thing is, have you chosen the correct category for your business? Really important. I think you've got up to 5 categories depending on the listing. And it's really important thinking about where do I think I've got the chance of being high inside a category? So where's the less competition, but also where am I really more relevant? When people are searching for X, Y, and Z, what's the relevancy? Where do I think my business should be? What category should it be in? The next most important thing is giving Google the ability to be able to triangulate this data. So your business can be listed in lots of different directories. We call these citations, and there's many, from Scoot to 118 to Thomson to Yellow Pages to Yell.com. There's so many different directories. And if you were to just quickly Google local citations in the UK, I'm sure there's lots of websites that will list many different directories that you could be in. And what you need to ensure is that your name, address, and phone number are all absolutely consistent. So, for example, if your business has got limited at the end, Fleek Marketing Limited is my business, do I spell it LTD or do I spell it limited? And what I need to do is make sure that I use the same across all the different citations, all the different directories. Do I spell road, RD, or ROD? Again, we need to make sure that there's consistency across all the different citations, because what we want to do, knowing that Google is really a computer, what we want to do is make it easy for Google's computers to understand that that listing is exactly the same as that listing. And so the more you can pinpoint that data for Google, the better. The next thing is having your website have your address and phone number on it. So again, I know small business owners that don't want their address on their website because perhaps they're running from a home office. But unfortunately, for you to get any power from your Google listing, you absolutely need your website, your address and your phone number that matches Google My Business listing on your website. And what we need to do is use that thing called schema, which I mentioned earlier, which I'm going to go into in a few minutes, to really make it very abundantly clear to Google that this is the official address, this is the official phone number, and we'll come on to that in a moment. And then the last thing is the links to your website. So, you know, if you want to appear high in search in Google full stop, there's typically 3 things. It's the content, the usability of the site, the technical aspect. So there's the content, the technical aspect, and links and reputation. And that's about having other websites linking to you, talking about you. And that is a huge factor. And the last few slides I have towards the end of this presentation talk about some of the ways you could get those links to your website. So we're going to talk about schema, that structured data, the rich snippets. It's got lots of different names, but it's all the same thing in essence. So whether it be structured data, rich snippets, markup, featured snippets, microformats, microdata, RDFs, it's all the same stuff. And what this is it's a bit of code that goes into the HTML of your website, into the code of your website. So instead of just seeing the name and the address and the phone number like you do at the top there's a bit of code that wraps round the name, address, and phone number and says to Google, look, This is using the official language of schema. It's using the local business version of that schema. And it's saying within that, here's the official name, the company name, and here's the official address, and here's the official postcode, and here's the official telephone number. So what we're doing is we're using schema to enter that data into Google's database. So when Google has a look at our website, it can see that we've got an address and a phone number, and it can see that we've marked it up using schema to say, this is official, this is what it is, put it in your database. And it can then triangulate against the Google My Business listing to say, actually, yeah, okay, we've been to the website, we can see the address is the same, it's a big tick box. There's lots and lots of different types of schemas. And by the way, today I'm only talking about the address side of schema, or attributes of the business, should I say. There's a huge other set of schemas, everything from jobs to events to recipes to video schema to all sorts. There's so many different schemas. And my advice, and FAQ schema, blog content schema, my advice is to schema your website up like there's no tomorrow. But if we're focusing purely on the business, the organization schema, then it allows us to say, this is the official company name, the official address, the official phone number. This is the official logo. This is who founded the company. This is when the company was founded. All sorts of different things. This is our official Twitter account. This is our official Facebook account. All of those things help Google tie the whole, and you're tying it all together for Google to not have to guess this stuff. So if you're a business, which I assume you all are, you've got two choices. You've got, sorry, you haven't got two choices at all. You start with organization schema on the left-hand side, and you decide, do you fit into any of those categories? And if you don't, you fit into the local business category. So what I'm trying to get across here is that there's lots of different schemas depending on your business. There could be something very, very relevant. So for example, if you're a sports organization or a funding schema or a government organization or an airline, you should absolutely be using that schema instead of local business schema. And then when it comes to local business schema, there's some real drilled down areas as well. So for example, estate agents, dentists, libraries, shopping centers, recycling centers, dry cleaning, emergency services all have their own schemas. And what this is an official way of saying to Google, look, we're officially a dentist. This is our official company name. This is our official address. These are our official opening hours. All of that sort of stuff. If you don't fall into any of those categories, then you fall into the local business category. And you can use that schema to mark lots and lots of things up. So whether you're marking up your company name, your logo, the customer service phone number, all of this stuff can appear in the knowledge panel on the right-hand side of Google's homepage. Here you can see the social media profiles that we've said to Google. These are officially our company social media profiles, and Google can bring those up on the first page of Google in that knowledge panel. Just pause to see if there's any questions at all. We all okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I talked about links and reputation, and this is the biggest thing that then needs to be done outside of Google My Business and outside of the website, because what you've got to do is start demonstrating to Google that local people, local businesses, local organizations, local websites, more importantly, are linking to you and talking about you. And so there's lots and lots of different ways of doing this. So the first most obvious way is going back to that local citation. So that's 118 Scoot Thompson, Yale.com. Some of these are American, so you can ignore them. But it's around finding all the potential local citations and putting your details in there and creating a listing for your organization. That's the easy step. But the next step is to think about, where could we generate links from which websites? And there's 3 slides here. You can have a copy of these slides afterwards with pleasure. Why didn't I do this 20 years ago? Someone's just said. Yeah, well, there's so many things to learn on the digital age. You know, we're all learning every day. But there's 3 slides here. You can have a copy of the slides after with pleasure. These are sort of, you know, there's about 40 to 50 ideas here on how to generate links. So it's everything from entering a local, and it's all about local. So pretty much everything is got the word local in. So it's entering a local business award, because you'll be featured on the business, on the awards site, which is a local site, of course. Local influencers, you could become a local resource. So perhaps you could produce a guide on your website for the local area, or, you know, something to do with your products and services, but on a really local level, and become a local resource. You could search for online mentions and ask them to turn those mentions into links. You could gain exposure through prominence through local guides, like I just discussed, but also seeing what other local guides are out there and seeing if your business can be included in those. Perhaps you can speak to the local schools or colleges to think about links from alumni. Could you be featured on local review sites? Could you write for your local newspaper or magazines? I think someone's asking, are you able to send us the recording? I believe that this is being recorded on YouTube. It'll be fully live afterwards. And as I said, you're welcome to have my slides too. Promote your business through a local interest website. Build a useful tool to attract local traffic. So that could be, for example, building some kind of calculator, you know, what's the ROI on this, or how to save money, you know, how much money could I save doing this, or, you know, what's the cost of divorce? There's all sorts of different calculators you could create depending on your business. So perhaps you could create some kind of local calculator. You could reverse engineer and steal your competitors' links. So you could have a look at where your competitors get local links from, and then approach those people to say, actually, you know, we offer something a bit different and maybe a bit more up to date, and we've got some more up to date content. Would you consider linking to us instead? Writing valuable content, ebooks. I've put ego bait, local expert contributor outreach. So that's about finding experts, local experts, and playing to their egos by using them on your website. So whether that be doing some kind of guest interview or whatever else it might be, because once you've got their content on your website, there's a very good chance that they'll link back to it. You could run Facebook ads. There's all sorts of ideas. And you know, one of the key things on the right hand side towards the bottom there is about those local directories. So what local directories could you be in? Could you post jobs on local job sites? One on here, maybe you offer free Wi-Fi. Well, there's free Wi-Fi directories. So, you know, looking for free Wi-Fi in Leeds, and then there's a whole list of places you could get it. Why don't you add yourself into that directory? Doing local blogs, local discounts, hosting a local event, creating a local infographic, offering local internships. Use photos from local photographers and tell them, you know, would you be happy for me to use that image on my website? And I'll link back to you. And there's a good chance that if you were to do that, they may well link to you to say, here's an example of how that photograph's being used in the real world. Provide free testimonials to other businesses. Charity work, that's a huge one. So could you align yourself with charities? Could you donate to local food banks or shelters? Because there's a good chance that your story the good chance your story will be shared on their website and then linked back. And could you be featured on local clubs or organization websites? So I'm going to wrap up and take questions, you know, because there's only a few of us. I wanted to keep it a bit more succinct, I think, and see if there's any questions afterwards. But I've got a podcast. Can't not just give you a quick call to action at the end here. I've got a podcast. I'd love you to be a listener, so I can drop the link to that in the chat. And it's all about inspiring business owners like yourself and giving loads of marketing tips and tricks and business advice. So I'd love you to become a listener, and feel free to challenge me if you think this is all a load of nonsense. But if you have questions, now is the time. And you know, Andrew, thanks for allowing me to share this with everyone today.
Well, thanks, John. It's been really helpful, quite insightful. It's definitely opened my eyes to a few things. Again, just obviously scratching the surface of that, the whole idea of the schema and actually feeding that official information into that knowledge panel. So I think we've all sort of had a dabble in some way or other with some of the Google services. But again, as you say, you've got the one login, but then there's so much power behind that. Taking it forward, it's just sometimes just a bit overwhelming knowing where to start. So yeah, I think we've got a few questions. So can you read them off there, Johnny? Just John, as they come.
I think I've correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I'd covered the questions. Have we got? There is an extra one that I missed actually. How do you look for local influencers? So I guess it's about understanding your niche and your products and services. So I'll give you an example. I know that accountants can be very good influencers because, you know, once a quarter, once a year, they look at your figures and they say, what have you spent 20 grand on this for? And you explain and they say, well, actually, you know, I know someone that might be able to offer that for, you know, a bit of a better service. You could speak to them. So I think accountants are really good influencers depending on what your products or services are. So if for example, you could identify that, okay, accountants are influencers, the next question would be, okay, to have a look at which accountants are the ones that are online the most, which are the ones that are on social media. And I'm not talking about the accountants as the business, I'm talking about the specific, the people. So is there a specific accountant in, you know, you're in Wetherby, is there a specific accountant in Wetherby that seems to be doing a lot on LinkedIn, seems to be doing a lot on Twitter? They are the person that's potentially influential. And actually, sorry, it doesn't need to be that they're doing a lot online. That's just one metric. It could be that they, you know, run local events, like Andrew's running an event here. He's an influencer. So trying to identify accountants, you know, or people that stand out would be the answer. I don't think there was any other questions, but if I've missed any, let me know.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thanks for all of the that on there. So thanks for throwing the roll back again. Hopefully, I'll just wrap up. So effectively, is this basically covered everything that people were wanting to know? Feel free if you've got any other comments, or if you want to unmute and just say something, feel free. Anyone? Are we all good? So it's two things, isn't it? You either get a load of extra questions or the silence because you've answered everything.
Well, the way I've done it is that I can hear myself. Okay. The way I've done it is that I've allowed people to ask all the way through. And so yeah, we've sort of hopefully a bit more of a conversation than just Q&As at the end. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So again, digital. Oh.
Thank you so much there to think about.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So as I said, Digital Cafe. If you Google it, you'll notice we've got a Google panel on the right hand side there, which I think we could probably do with a little bit more information on. That's our homework, I think. Again, next event that we've got coming up is again going into a little bit more around the whole cyber security side of things and why it's important, and looking at the whole digital data protection and why it matters. So that's going to be our next event, which you can see is listed on the 17th of June. We've got another event coming up after that, where we're going to talk to a chap called Jamie Thompson. He got a website, and using all of the sort of links that we've just been talking about from an SEO point of view, he just had a go trying to do it hands-on himself. And obviously we're just going to have in conversation with Jamie, and he's going to show us what he did, how it worked for him, and the results that he's getting, which I think should be quite an interesting one. So realistically, please remember that we do have a YouTube channel. I think someone did ask about this. So again, if you search for Digital Cafe Network on YouTube itself, we've got 30 subscribers at the moment. Love to get that up to 40 or so. So again, if you subscribe, there's also a little bell symbol. If you click on the bell symbol, you'll actually get an alert when we've actually put up another video or so. So other than that, thank you very much. I'd like to think we've dealt with the questions. So all in all, thank you ever much for coming. And this has been Digital Cafe Network.